sing with men from Port Madog. Join with those who come of the mountains, join with those who come of the sea. Men of Wales, now come and be counted, let your voices sing for the free. Come we all from Cricket and Kellogg, come we from Glamorgan and Royal, come to sing the glory of country, sing with men from Abertall. Join with those who come of the mountains, join with those who come of the sea. Men of Wales, now come and be counted, let your voices sing for the free. Men of Wales, now come and be counted, men of Wales, now come and be counted, let your voices sing for the free.
It's my pleasure to present this special Tony Award for Lifetime Achievement in the Theater to Ming Cho Lee.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm given 2 minutes, and we'll see if I'll stay within it. As you know, I have the unbroken record of being a total failure on Broadway theater. I have more flops than anyone can count. And I think it requires a certain amount of vision and for the Tony Committee to actually give an award to a failure. I think there is reason for failure because it's for them to realize that even failing, there may be something real in there. I would also say that I owe a good deal of my life to Bernie Gersten, who interviewed me in 1954. And then Paul Libben and I did a show together when he was merely getting coffee at Joe Malzina's studio. And we did a production, a Crucible, together. And that's when I knew that I'm going to make all the mistakes I make in New York. We ran out of money, and there will be no sets. And I said, I am going to take my name off the program. And Paul said, no, stay in there. And I said, no, I can't stand that. And so I took the name off the program, and it was a huge hit. I am very, very happy that finally I'm getting a Tony Award. I have one, but this is somewhat different, and I just want to make sure that that everyone knows that I am greatly appreciative for the people who supported me and allow me to actually continue to work, believe it or not, and I'm continue to teach at Yale. And make all the mistakes I continue to make. And I thank you very much. It went way over 2 minutes.
Hello. On behalf of Betsy and the family, Richard, Karen, Katie, Christopher, David, Eileen, Andrew, and Eamon, welcome to Clambake 2022. We're here to celebrate Ming through his family and his extended family of friends, colleagues, assistants, and Clambake alumni. Have I left out anyone? Welcome all. This now is our words from my wonderful husband, Michael, who's sitting over there. And he says, in memory of Ming Cho Lee. To Ming Cho Lee, the man, the incredible man, we gather to recognize his life and his work, the reach of which extends to thousands of people and the likes of which will never be seen again. I first became aware of Ming around 1965 while teaching at Pomona College. I saw an image he had designed in a theater publication, a structure sitting on the edge of a hill, both beckoned and frightened you. I was struck by its ability to draw you in, even though you had no idea what might await you. I could not wait to know who this designer was and learn more about his work. From that day forward, I was looking for Ming Cho Lee. In just a few years, our paths would intersect in New York, where I had moved to help build the School of the Arts at NYU. It was suggested that Ming be invited to join the faculty. I was delighted. He had no idea that I'd been an admirer of his for 3 years. Our responsibilities kept us busy in different areas of the school, but a shared foundation was laid. Ming soon went on to teach at Yale, where his own father had been a student, and where Ming would remain for the rest of his long and esteemed career. Back in New York, I had formed the League of Professional Theater Training Programs and wanted to introduce the field of design into the mission. I reached out to Ming, took him out to lunch at Aunt Fish, remember that? And together we conceived the Design Portfolio Review. Our collaboration would last for many decades. After more than a dozen design portfolio reviews, the league closed, but Ming and Betsy reimagined the review as an independent event, and Ming's Clambake thrived for many years to come. After concluding our work together for the league, our careers took us on different paths, but our deep friendship endured for many, many years, right up until his passing. Ming Cho Lee was the most interesting, creative, wonderful man I have ever known, and I am so grateful to have had him in my life. This is mine. In 1990 or 91, Ming, Betsy, Michael, and I organized a design conference. At a talkback, a student asked Ming, "What do you do if your play is set in a void?" Ming thought for no more than a second or two and asked, "What does it look like?" Where's the crane? Oh, hi, honey. Thank you.
Would you elaborate a little bit on your clam bake, which is not a clam bake?
Well,
Has
yeah,
anyone come out of it? How many?
I feel I have said it all, but I like to say that it makes me very nervous with all this design talk.
Me too.
Very nervous.
We're doers, not talkers.
Yes.
Yeah.
that's
Well,
very
not
good.
only that, when you reduce to design talk, it's all about how to. And what we are really interested in as design is what and why. And I think that is at the gist of what theater is all about. How to, you have to have it, you have to have the skill, then you do it. But what is difficult is the what and the why. Is it worth doing? What is it all about? We are all about context. Without context, what is theater? Theater is about life. It's about human events. And so, in some way, if you talk about design, theater, lighting, eventually you have to talk about theater. And why is it there? Is it worth doing? And therefore, is it worth designing for? I always feel that we are people who do an act of transformation. All we have is words. And with directors and actors, they transform words into real people, engage in the real human events, and experience to be shared with audience. And is it worth sharing? Is it dangerous? Does it offend people? If a theater doesn't offend people, that's a political statement, and I think it's pretty tepid theater. And probably it's not worth doing. And so there's so much to talk about, and the how-to you can learn anytime. You can learn it at age 68, and perhaps at age 78, you may do something that how-to will, and you will continue to learn. But the what and the why is something that needs to be nurtured, to make people aware of. And that means that you, and I love mixing around with people who are younger than I am, and to know what's in their mind, what bothers them, to encourage them to have something to say. And this is the country, and if we don't do something about it, this is a country, still, it allows you to say anything. You go to China and you are in trouble. You say anything and you will have Tiananmen Square and 4,000 people later, and they still don't care about human rights. So in some way, coming back to the Clambake, what I feel important is to gather people together and talk about the what and the why. And then, is there the skill or something that gets in the way of able to articulate the what and the why? And that is what the Clambake is all about. And I feel that very selfishly, I found that if I'm strictly teaching at Yale and all I see are the Yale students' work, then I'm isolated. And this is a big country. And I just simply would not allow myself to be isolated. So, selfishly, I would like to see people from other schools. And I have to tell you, I steal a lot of ideas from them.
But then you're saying for the what and the why, are you getting back to the word, that's the important thing?
Well, I guess, words, music, and the what. What is the action? What is the human events? And I, in the old days, I now remember that I actually was the first Maharam Award receiver, and big deal. If I designed the way I did in '64, I should be shot because, but the thing is, now, and in the old days, I keep talking about sculptural material, blah, 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 blah. And now, what I enjoy is when suddenly I'm stuck and I'll read the play again.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Andrew Lee. I'm Ming's grandson. David in the booth is my father. And today I'll be reading remarks from Jon Jory, who couldn't make it here today. Ming Cho Lee was a friend. Working with him was as deep a pleasure as I ever got in a long career of theater. A set needs to enable the playwright, the actors, and the director, and other designers to do their best work. Ming did that, and it's a juggling feat for the ages. But, and here's the amazing thing, Ming made it seem easy. He was a master of the beautiful. His sets are as beautiful as great paintings or sculptures, but they might be harder to do. With a painting, you don't have to suit your work to a text or cope with other artists' needs and ideas and have actors crawling all over them and then see your work destroyed and put into dumpsters. Ming's task was to create beauty and function and serve a given piece of literature at the same time. A stage setting drags with it literary concerns and demon practicalities that make it an artistic minefield. It's like trying to make art out of designing a fork. Who could do that? Ming could. I hear he was a great teacher. He certainly taught me through the process. There could not have been a more literate mind in his field of endeavor. On the simplest level, Ming always talked about the text in a way that revealed it to me. He was a master dramaturg, collaborator, and literary critic. I always learned more about the play from Ming than I had come into the room with. He always wanted to know what I saw in the play. Sounds simple, right? Doesn't often happen. And after I said what I could, he always replied with the same words. What if? What if was where practicality and art became the third thing where Ming's magic lived. Ming and Marcia and the play. God, that was fun. Actually, I should say Ming, Marcia, myself, and the model. It was simply an honor to think alongside him. At the end of The Tempest, we wanted a flower to grow downstage in about 15 seconds and then black out. Ming worked on stage on that problem for about 3 hours because he knew it was what we had decided the whole work was about. He wasn't leaving the tech before we got that flower right. Ming thought theater was important and deserved his time. That alone made a whole lot of people think their life was worthwhile. Thank you, Ming. Jon.
You guys have known each other how long?
Well, almost 50 years. I'd like to tell the story about our meeting.
Please.
There was a graduate student named Omar Paxson at Northwestern when I was an undergrad. And then eventually Omar became a teacher, head of, I think, the theater department at Occidental College in California. And I went to New York and I began my professional career. And I began doing a few shows in television and then in off-Broadway and theater. And Omar wrote to me, says, you have to meet this young student of mine, the young designer, named Ming Cho Lee, improbably. And Ming came to New York, and he was in New York and getting certainly an assistant. You have to fill in your end of it.
Yeah, all right.
But I was doing the first off-Broadway production of On the Town. And I thought, well, I'll meet Ming and see what it's like. I want to see him anyway. Anyway, he came and we had an interview, and he opened up his portfolio, and they were the most glorious.
But I was frightened out of my wits, I'll tell you. Yeah, no.
And especially I remember a production renderings of John Steinbeck book named The Pearl, which then became a dance piece or a theater piece?
A dance piece.
Yeah.
Dance piece.
And I thought, I have got to work with this guy sometime. But it wasn't meant for On the Town. It was a little not quite urban enough, not quite jazzy enough. Anyway, soon after that, I started working at the New York Shakespeare Festival, and as soon as I could, I brought Ming Cho Lee into the family. And one of my best memories is being up in, where were we, Betsy? 121st Street in Columbia, and I think it was in a little apartment, at a wonderful meeting, I treasure it. And we've been family ever since.
That's true. And do you know that he is an excellent cantor, excellent singer? Have you ever heard him sing? Some of them have. Some, and a wonderful tenor, lyric tenor voice. And never age for some reason, just like him, never age. I just want to say that it is Jerry who brought me into the world of Shakespeare, and in some way brought me to be really being part of the theater, because actually at that time I really was really green. You know, I work in the studio and so forth. And so that's the beginning.
Well, one thing I remember, Theone Aldrich did the costumes, and of course there were a lot of costumes made of chiffon that floated around. And Ming had created a set that was full of edges and pricks and that kept catching on the chiffon.
Lesson number one, forget texture. I mean, just forget texture. You know,
I think the morning of the opening, we were all up there kind of...
yeah, you end up with Sanders going...
all the texture.
Forget texture. It's not worthwhile, please.
Hi, I'm Marjorie Kellogg. In 1993, Ming Cho Lee was honored by the Longworth Theater with their Mary L. Murphy Award for Design Excellence. I was asked to say a few words at that ceremony, and when the time came to think about what I might say today, I reread this text, and it's just as heartfelt now as it was then. But I was so taken by the present tense because I was talking to Ming, who was sitting right in front of me at that time. And I thought maybe I could share some of that immediacy with you and read it slightly edited today. So here it is. The best thing about events like this is that you actually get to stand up in public and thank the people in your life who really deserve it. For instance, Ming Cho Lee. To talk about the profound effect Ming's work has had on the theatrical design world without models or slides, although we have them. I didn't expect that, is an exercise in futility. I'd rather celebrate the man himself and the effect he's had on so many of our lives. I was never officially Ming's student, and yet he was my greatest teacher. My position in his long professional history comes quite near the beginning. I came into his studio in 1964, before he had the rich ore of the great university design programs to mine for studio help. I was 17 years old and a summer production assistant at the New York Shakespeare Festival's Delacorte Theater in Central Park, where Ming was the principal designer. I knew nothing. I had no real skills, except whatever I was born with. Ming could have left me that way, but carrying buckets, washing brushes, running props, but Ming cannot, and I say cannot, present tense, walk past fertile ground without trying to make something grow in it. He took me under his wing. He taught me scene painting. He began my drafting training. For the next 3 college summers, and for 2 years after I graduated, he provided the kind of on-the-job training that can only be called an old-fashioned apprenticeship. There was a lot about Ming's studio in those days that called to mind a medieval craft guild. Perhaps it was the leaded glass windows or the line of eager backs bent over drawing boards. No computers then, no drafting programs. Perhaps it was building that quarter-inch scale model one more time, or redoing that section until you got the damn thing right. One thing it certainly was total immersion. The design process permeates, present tense, permeates Ming's entire life, and therefore that of anyone working in his studio. It wasn't a workplace. It was, although much incredible work did get done, it was like being taken into a family, much as an old-time apprentice would have been in those days. The three boys occupied the only bedroom, and Ming and Betsy slept in the studio. On Monday mornings, you had to clear off an assortment of books and clothing from your drawing board. I learned to sip scotch in order to join Ming at his 5 o'clock break, though we always worked on till 6. To this day, Richard Lee has been known to call me Big Sis. But deepening the sense of immersion is that Ming never stops designing or thinking about design. Even a discussion of the daily news over Betsy's glorious lunch table was somehow about design. Because design is about standards and making choices, and because Ming holds daily life up to the same exacting mirror as he does the second act of Boris Godunov. In the process, design becomes as important as life, and life becomes measured by the standards of design: point of view, symmetry, balance, attention to detail, as well as the more human values such as truth, fairness, compassion. I don't know if this can be taught in a classroom. It happens mostly by osmosis, and it's perhaps the crucial difference between teaching and mentoring. Sure, Ming taught me his craft by a somewhat haphazard design by example process. I learned things in the order he needed me to know him. But living within Ming's value system on a daily basis, I couldn't help absorb that also. There are possible disadvantages to being a believer in truth and justice, particularly these days. But Ming does not preach truth as a moral prerequisite. It's simply something he relies upon, always hopes for, and always tries to deliver. In a way, it makes him a kind of innocent. When people behave badly or want something crass or stupid, it surprises, even offends him. I often thought of him as a latter-day Quixote, jousting at the windmills of cynical commercialism. Again, different from the classroom is being present at the creation. Those were the glory days of the not-for-profit theater, with visionaries like Joe Papp, Zelda Fitchandler, or Gordon Davidson leading the charge, and new theaters opening every month instead of closing. There was a galvanizing sense of shared purpose. As a studio assistant, I wasn't just studying the design process. I was watching it happen in all its real-life glories and grotesqueries, observing firsthand the negotiations and the betrayals of collaboration, or seeing how life and design intersect as Betsy labored to make ends meet and the crazy schedule work out. It can be sobering to be in the studio drafting the second act while the producers have Ming in the next room cutting the first act to ribbons. But you also get to share the thrill when the process does work, when a knotty design problem finally resolves itself, or a collaboration is joyful and inspirational, as so many of Ming's are. And with directors and other designers, and even with the scene shops, setting in my mind a model of the creative partnership that I've hoped to achieve in my own work all my life. And you watch how your mentor handles the ups and downs, how he or she operates at these moments when he is more exposed and under pressure than you could ever see him in a classroom. What I observed in Ming were discipline, passion, and grace, not always in comfortable balance. Most often, passion ruled and grace, sometimes barely, kept him in check. It was discipline and his belief in the theater and in the people he worked with that kept him on track. Passing on the knowledge that it may live after you is how a true master shows his love for his art. Ming has been doing this all his life. He can't help himself. Entire generations of designers have been honed to his standards and nurtured by his generosity. Ming and Betsy have always brought people together for networking and celebration, such as the famously overstuffed annual Christmas parties. And his concern extends past his students to include the students of others, with the yearly portfolio review that came to be called the Clambake, of which we have already talked. So much more than a training event, the Clambake has been central to building community and communication, generating that old sense of shared purpose within the theater design world. Now, back in 2022, with the man himself present only in memory, I'm still endlessly grateful for my old-fashioned apprenticeship, which never really ended, but which began that day in the hot sun at the Delacorte when Ming first took the brush out of my hand and said, "No, let's do it this way."
Okay, all right. And you suddenly say, oh, this is the perfect match for her to get out of the throes of this horrible man. Then you have designed, starting an opera called Salome, written, actually Herodias, about Salome, written by the French composer Massenet, where John the Baptist is a very sympathetic guy. Wonderful music to sing. I mean, they're almost like lovers, and the love is definitely responded to. But that's Massenet, who is not Strauss. Massenet is French, sentimentalist. Strauss is something else. Although Strauss is not sentimentalist when he wrote Electra and Salome. But when he wrote the Rosenkavalier, that's very sentimental. Do you know the Rosenkavalier? No, you don't know Rosenkavalier? No. Yes, you do. Melissa, you're well educated. Jeez, what? Aha. And anyone knows the Rosenkavalier? It's a long opera, But and Hofmannsthal wrote. That's libretto. That's a great composer and lyricist. And the Rosenkavalier is Strauss' attempt of recreating 18th century Mozart, because Mozart is his god. And it's about an older woman having an affair with a younger man, and the baron from the country came to propose to a household with a daughter called Sophie, young woman, and that aristocrat household is a little bit down on the hill, a little bit poor, so they have to marry the daughter to this rich baron who is really an oaf. And the baron asked the young man, Octavian, to present a silver rose on his behalf to Sophie. And as luck would have it, as this cavalier, the Rose Cavalier, arrive, take a look at Sophie, and love in first sight. And the presentation of the rose, and I'm talking about it, the music is so amazing. I'm talking about, I get goosebumps. It is so beautiful, you can't stand it. And then, as the story keeps on going, and much
comedy and so forth. At the end, the older Marjorie discovered that her young lover is actually in love with a young woman. And she decided to give the young man up. So there is a trio, 3 soprano, mezzo singing the young man, Sophie is the high soprano, and Marjorie, the older woman. 3 soprano have a trio that breaks your heart. I mean, it is so beautiful. I mean, the Rose and Cavalier is long, but when you come to that trio finish, you say, okay, I don't need to listen to any more opera, never. This will do it. And this is the person who wrote Salome. And Electra is absolutely like this. Then suddenly decided that he would like to be Mozart.
Other side of the coin.
Other side of the coin. So, the Rosenkavalier is worth knowing, right, Melissa? Yes. Yeah. Anyway, and you talk about it, once you have heard it, there are sections that you will never forget because it is so beautiful. Anyhow, okay, so this is very good. Yeah, you should be artistic director.
I'm Rob Marx, and Betsy and Richard have asked me to say a few words about Ming and opera. And before I start, I really have to say how wonderful it is to see everybody here. And I mean, we have multi-generations of theater family in this room, and that all by itself is a tribute to Ming and to Betsy. So regarding Ming and opera, of course, that's a book-length subject all on its own. But even for a few minutes of tribute today, it's pretty humbling to follow that video of Ming, because you see how much opera really meant to him and what joy he took in it. The magic there, it's not just Ming in his legendary Saturday morning Yale classroom. It's that you get to see how wonderfully moved he is just thinking about the Rosenkavalier final trio. That hardly any of those students knew Rosenkavalier at all is irrelevant. Ming's almost envious that at least some of those students are going to go out and find a Rosenkavalier recording and hear that music for the first time. And even if Ming mangles the plot, could anyone be more in awe of opera? And opera was in Ming's very being, going back to the Rigoletto he saw as a child in Shanghai. By 1958, he was an assistant designer at the old Met on 39th Street, and as we all know, his career jumped very, very quickly to just about every place where opera was being staged in America in those years. Early on, there were deep production commitments with San Francisco, Baltimore, Juilliard, and many other houses. But it was New York City Opera where Ming designed their opening production in the State Theater, Ginestero's Don Rodrigo, where so many of his design concepts came together. The simultaneity of Ming's designs for Shakespeare at the Delacorte and opera at the State Theater really grounded just wholly new forms of abstraction and scenic transparency on New York's major stages, year after year after year. And it was a visual journey for audiences led by Ming. Unlike so many other great designers for whom opera was an occasional assignment, Ming really jumped in and tackled that beast throughout his career. Not since the days of Joseph Urban had a major stage designer in America committed so much time and creativity to opera, most notably at City Opera and then at the Met. I had the great, great good luck to grow up in New York in the 1960s, when the performing arts here were so inspiring and ambitious, with the added benefit of very low ticket prices and a large working class audience. The politics of the theater then was to stay outside the commercial box in the new emerging not-for-profit companies, notably for Ming, Joe Papp's New York Shakespeare Festival. But in opera too, there was certainly an upstart counterculture element to the ensemble-based New York City opera where Ming thrived. And I was so fortunate to actually see Ming's Electra, Hamlet, Peer Gynt, War of the Roses, Two Gents, Much Ado, and so many other plays outdoors in the Delacorte, while in those same seasons, Don Rodrigo and Julius Caesar and Bamarzo and Tales of Hoffmann and the Donizetti Tudor operas and Faust were all on stage indoors at City Opera. And all that flowing sculptural originality and opera design culminated with the opening night of Ming's legendary Boris Godunov at the Met in 1974. Things then were pretty tough at the Met. They'd been through a very difficult transition out of the Rudolph Bing era, and then Boris opened and seemed to set things right again with truly visionary, unprecedented designs that were grounded completely within the Russian spirit of that opera, while also looking unlike anything else the Met audience had experienced before. Boris was an immense hit and a much-needed box office draw that stayed in the Met repertory for 30 years. So Ming may have had flops on Broadway, but not on the opera side of his career. I came into Ming's orbit when I arrived at Yale in the fall of '72, entering the drama school's now long-gone program in dramatic literature and criticism. Now, I'm sure I crossed paths with Ming before then, somewhere, but the first time I really met him came a year after coming into Yale, when the Yale Rep and the Yale School of Music were planning a co-production of the Brecht-Weill Rise and Fall of the City of Mahagoni to be staged in the University Theater on York Street. This was planned as the entire full-scale opera, not the intimate Mahagoni song cycle that the Rep had already produced a couple of years earlier. Now, as a second-year drama school student, I was a lowly assistant on the production, which meant mostly looking for typos in Michael Feingold's translation, serving as the rehearsal pianist's page turner, and sometimes going on as the offstage voice of the speaker who announces the titles between scenes. But there I was at the first production meeting with Ming, who was supervising Tony Stragus' set designs, and the news had just come down that Otto Werner Müller, our uber-autocratic conductor from Yale Music, had committed to an orchestra of 48 musicians, at which point Ming stopped all discussion. You mean we are doing full Mahagoni opera with 48 players in theater without orchestra pit? Oy vey. And that was my personal introduction to Ming, to be followed by decades of opera and theater conversations not unlike that Rosenkavalier video. During the years when I ran the Performing Arts Library at Lincoln Center and we hosted the annual Clambake with Ming and Betsy, I saw how the challenges of designing opera brought out so much of Ming's inherent generosity. I once eavesdropped on Ming's conversation with a student who was not from Yale, who had a Salome model, and I'm sure you all remember there were always Salome models. Something about the student's design bothered Ming, and I forget what the problem was. Maybe the placement of the cistern for John the Baptist's entrance. There was something. And the student was initially crushed, really upset, that Ming was critical of his work. But after making his point, Ming said, "Now I have to tell you that I made the same mistake on a design for Martha Graham. Let me show you how Martha fixed it." And now that student completely turned around. In Ming's modesty and inclusiveness and congeniality, he not only shared the experience of himself tripping up, but brought the student inside a little bit of design history by sharing Martha Graham's solution to the problem. It was a great example, one of many, showing what made Ming and Betsy's annual Clambake such an exceptional human experience. For all his self-doubt, Ming inspired so much and so many, especially given where we are today as a nation and an art form. Ming's artistic and political priorities should remain ours. There's a wonderful Beverly Sills' line from the Old City Opera days. Apparently a production wasn't coming together as expected, and Ming was visibly concerned. And backstage, Beverly's response was just to say, Ming, between my pipes and your pipes, we'll be fine. And they were. And with Ming's human and creative legacy still among us, we are too.
Cerca
that was the finale of 9 songs. And the music we used is called Farewell to God. It's a ritual song from the Zhou tribe in Taiwan. Ming did this for us in 1993. Well, Ming never ceases to surprise, shock, and sometimes scare me. I founded the company Clambake Dance Theater in 1973. That was the first professional dance company, and there was no professional theater to speak of. So we try our way and doing little things. And by the time it's about to celebrate the 10th anniversary, we talk. I think we have done so far and not that bad. Do you think wouldn't that be nice to invite a giant, a legend, to come and challenge us? So we have friends in New York to find Ming's address from the Yellow Book. That's how it started. And I wrote a letter. To my shock, I was shocked truly. 3 weeks later, I got a letter. It said, "Come and talk." So after finishing an engagement at the Pompidou Museum in Paris, I came over and I said, we are going to do a work called The Dream of the Red Chamber, which is more complicated than Proust's remembrance of the things past. And Ming said, I know nothing about Chinese. I know that's a famous classic. I know nothing about it, but let's try it. So, and we went to the Met to see some of the Chinese porcelain and talk about colors. And then I got a model which is fragrant. He simplified everything and left the whole stage bare. And there are 4 sets of silk, dyed silk, that run horizontally across the stage, and they will move like this as the passage of time and the signaling the different season arriving. All is beautiful. And Dream of the Red Chamber opened the first legitimate theater in Taipei. But they didn't allow us to nail the beautiful new stage. So what happened is the set starts beautifully like this. By the time towards the end, it's going down, drooping and drooping, and as if trying to tell the downfall of the family. And Ming actually covered his head. And what are we going to do? We brought a master, and we were really insulting him. Oh, God. I don't know how we get off that, but he's always kind. But he said, how could that be possible? Well, you're doing a very good job, but how could that be possible? 10 years later, we thought, could we do it again? Now I think we better. We read more, we do more, and theater is coming along well. So that's 9 songs. And Ming came with the set. I couldn't imagine this. He insisted on coming from the airport to the studio to watch the rehearsal before he checked in the hotel. And after seeing this rehearsal, he said, wow, this is a powerful dance. And my set is terrible. I'm taking it home. I said, come on, I just couldn't believe it, for a young choreographer in Taiwan so far away, Ming is taking his set back home. He said, I'm going to redo it. I just don't think it's possible because time is so limited and, well, but the result is he compromised in a lot of things. He used the orchestra pit with real water and real lotus and candles, hundreds of candles to close the show. And he used golden, opulent lotus blossom to fill up the stage, and all is done in a few weeks. It was a hit throughout all the opera houses, in many opera houses in Europe. And of course, there is an added price to be paid by the presenter. In those opera houses, you will see the fire agent and the fire hall all the way back to the stage at the backstage. And they're willing to do that because it's so beautiful. And you can feel that sense of naturalness in this ritual in the primitive time. So I still couldn't believe it that he was going to take his set home, you know. But my biggest frustration is always after the show. I mean, Ming designed for us 4, maybe 5 of them. And each time, being a Chinese, being a Taiwanese, I mean, I like to take Ming to see Taiwan and eat good food, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He doesn't want to go out. And eating is very good, and he's engaged in working. So when he said he is going, I got a commission from Graz Opera in Austria, and this time I tried to plot a little thing. We saw the set that he duplicated the balcony on stage, so it's mirroring and about the truth and what about Rashomon. And I thought I did very good job. I think I can, after the opening night, I have a very compact tour to send him around in Vienna before going to the airport. But he said no, he is going back to teach at Yale. Each time I lost him on his journey back to Yale. But nowadays, I think I still can, Betty, I think I still can ring the bell at 12 East 87, the address of eternal inspiration.
I think that makes it.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's my trick. That's it.
That looks good.
That you just did.
Yeah.
That's great.
Now, Melissa.
Sorry, before you move on, could you just comment for a second? Could you verbalize what that did? I mean, I think it's wonderful, but I'd like to hear in your words what you think that solved.
It feels good.
It looks good.
It looks good. It somehow
stretches the space.
It somehow enclosed the space, and it did what your French guy wanted to do, you know, and it gives the play a scale. But half the time, it's all you look and say, oh, that looks good.
That's all you need.
Then all you need, and eventually some reason will come to you. Why? Oh, Ming. In so many cases, I really want all of you to somehow allow your eyes and your instinct, impulse, can't dictate how you make choices. I think constant questioning is good. There's no question about it. It's always good. Constant questioning to find a reason for everything may not be so good, because by the time you reason it out, very often your rationalization have entered. And so much of the art that we do based so much on
Divine
instinct.
inspiration.
Well, I hate the word inspiration, but it is your instinct. But why did I enter this stupid profession to begin with? What is the calling? Why am I doing it? Aside from doing things well, very important, aside from exercising, quote, creativity, but there is this thing called your creativity, whatever, imagining, whatever, is somehow always dealing with something that is bigger, and that is about how the arts, the work, connect with your way of living, connect with the society, connect with the time. And that's why I get so upset when people finally became the most famous theme park designer. It just drives me crazy. I mean, I'm not saying designing theme park does not have creativity. Probably you need more. It certainly requires a lot of skill. The theme park designer is designing fakery. You can go to Venice without the danger of being flooded. And all the ornaments are made of plastic, vacuum form. And so I'm 1 foot with Bob Rothstein and 1 foot with all of you. But I think from time to, at least for me, you do have to take stock in saying, is that what I got into this business for?
Why should one speak after Ming has spoken? He said everything and more. What a wonderful way to spend an afternoon with him. My heart hurts. I'm Jennifer Tipton. Ming Cho Lee was a consummate teacher. His capacious memory made it possible for him to speak about play after play after play. His knowledge of music was immense, as we've seen. He carried within his brain a library of research for good design. I must imagine that everyone here is as envious as I am of his prodigious knowledge of opera and dramatic literature. I suspect that everyone who once studied with him, or taught with him, or lived with him, today finds themselves judging what they do against what they think Ming would want them to do or expect them to do. He will always present a good measure of what is fine in this life. Both those who learned from Ming and thought it was a terrific way, and those who felt that another way was the right way, they have learned a profound respect for theater and the design for the stage. I'm speaking if I'd been a student of Ming's, but I feel that I was. He taught me just about everything I know about theater. There's no other person in my life who was so profoundly affected by the way that I feel myself about theater. But it was not only the students and teachers at Yale who had the opportunity to learn what Ming had to give. There was that Clambake that we have heard about already. Students graduating from other programs had the opportunity to sit with Ming and to learn from what his experience had been. And they also got to hear from a number of directors and other designers. And for those of you who were not able to see the wonderful exhibit of Ming's life work, I recommend Arnold Aronson's book. To see it all together is a rather extraordinary event. Each set was not just a picture of the play, but Ming's profound comment on the play and its context. If anyone ever doubted that it was possible to make clear one's feelings about the play through scenery, this proves the case. Not only does this leave its mark on the world of theater, ephemeral at best, but so does the legacy that he leaves with each of us to pass on to the next generation and to the ones that come after that. His effect is ever present, and his influence is everything. I feel so lucky to have been able to know Ming, to work with Ming, to see Ming's work. His absence leaves a huge hole in my heart, just as it must for many of you here. He was a teacher, a citizen, a humanitarian, a Mitch. He was a giant, and the earth is better for his having walked on it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Chris Stone was supposed to be here, and I was supposed to be her assistant in a flip from graduate school, but she cannot make it, and so I will go it alone. One of Ming's great gifts to his students was instilling in us the ambitious sense of failing no matter what. I'm not sure me reading Ming's sayings is what he had in mind. Here we go. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. Start strong. It is like house on fire. Why don't you just paint it red and call it a day? Alec, you very bad designer. If that is really what you want to do, if you don't vote, I might kill you. Betsy! Is that really where the stove goes? If you have time to sleep, you are not working hard enough. Where is Mongol pencil? Where is onion skin? My God, what were you thinking? There is nothing dishonorable in making a living. Well, that looks like the best drawing we will get out of Alec. I have to tell you, I have to say, where is Michael Jurgen? Glue it down, damn it. You are all driving me crazy. It is like not to be believed. Not too bad. Betsy would never allow it. Guy and doll. You should love what you do so much that you fall asleep laughing. Finish strong. And in their own words, a couple of video testimonials.
On the first day of class that I had with Ming, he said to all of us, "The theater will leave you, but a good marriage never will. And on the last day of class, at my very last critique, Ming privately said to me, and he was pointing with his finger going like this, he said, "You have ideas that I would never have, but you have to always make sure the ideas are spiraling toward the story and not away from the story." And those ideas have always stuck with me. Thank you, Ming.
And I think back on one of those morning classes where we were taught how to mask a show properly, and I think about it daily, and it was so insightful and so clear and wonderful, and it's one that jumps out and stays with me every day. Ming, I'm just so grateful. Take care. I love you all.
We were going around the room, the walls of the room where people's sketches, research, and white models were all mounted. And there was one project in particular presented by somebody from outside the drama school, which for whatever reason, I decided to be brutally frank about what I was seeing and feeling about it. And in not so many words, I said out loud that I felt that the design was cliche and unrigorous. In not so many words. Immediately after having said so, I regretted it, and I was so worried it would be misconstrued as unduly harsh and malicious and not constructively critical. And I felt that kind of inner rush of adrenaline and flushed cheeks that you get when you've just done something out of your comfort zone. And I wasn't really delighting in this moment at all, or this feeling, and this silence, this very heavy silence, descended on the room. And I looked over at Ming, and he had crossed his arms, and he was sitting on this rolling chair and looking at me in this strange way, and cocked his head to one side, and it took a few beats. And I was feeling at the time, because it was taking so long for a response to emerge, that because of how long this silence lingered, and I had no idea what was going to be said next, I was terrified that I'd gone too far. I was suddenly really, really regretting my candor, and I wanted to take the whole thing back. I really was not happy that I had done what I had just done. And Ming began to speak. Sutirat. Intense, long pause. Felt very intense and very long for a really long time. Sutirat, one day you will make an excellent teacher. And with that, I suddenly understood so much about Ming's MO and his critiques, his sense of urgency and responsibility, and his training the next generation, and the importance of being honest, not malicious, but honest. And that's one of my most salient memories.
I'm just curious what you see as like your major accomplishment in that arena, and also in teaching. Those are two areas. I'm just spinning off the theme of recognition and accomplishment. Is that too general?
I don't know how to answer that, except that I would not call it my accomplishment. You know, marriage, it takes two to make it work. And the fact that Betsy was able to kind of tolerate all that nonsense going on has as much to do with it. But I would say that in this business, to have as long a marriage as we have is an accomplishment. But I think we kind of eliminated some of the built-in conflict. And that is that, I'm not saying that's a good thing, that Betsy has always managed me. And so and that may not be an accomplishment. So the whole family's, the thrust is all about my professional work. And is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I have no idea. We work at home. So my professional life have become very much part of my kids' life and Betsy's life. And so family and work are not isolated from each other. I wouldn't encourage people working at home because ultimately it is a mess. All my assistants who work here become part of the family, and they know my assistant on a first name basis, and then, then they will meet my students and so forth. But that I think, because of it, I think we had a long marriage, and I have to say, without Betsy, it probably would not have happened. I would probably quit the business.
In what way? Just emotional support, or just
Emotional support, just all the finances, all the contractual thing. I wouldn't know how to handle it. This is Katie's little book on her trip to Washington.
That looks cute. We should.
Yeah.
She painted the whole thing.
Yeah.
How cute is that?
And her teacher somehow got her to do watercolor. And her watercolor is really pretty, free, and terrific.
Oh, how old is Katie now?
Katie is 7. Betsy is 7 or going to be 8?
No,
7.
7. 7 in March.
7 in March. Yeah.
She made a whole book about the trip?
Yeah.
Oh. Was she excited about it, just the pomp and the circumstance?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, you should read it. There is no question that she was excited.
Whenever I would call my grandparents' apartment as a kid, whether to say hi or to plan my next visit, Grandpa would always pick up the phone from the dining room. We'd exchange hellos, how are yous, and good goods. And then, within about 60 seconds or so, he'd say, "Okay, you want me to hand you off to your grandmother?" And then I'd hear, "Betsy, yeah, it's Katie." And then a little shuffle of feet. And then, "Okay, here she is." This was the grandpa I knew, a man for whom family was maybe not second nature, a man who occasionally patted me on the back and sometimes even gave me a handshake. He was not a grandpa who played games or sports. He was not a grandpa who cooked, and he certainly wasn't a grandpa who picked you up and swung you around. Sometimes I thought I could see in his eyes the desire to be closer to me and to all his grandchildren, openly adoring, openly affectionate, but he didn't quite know how. Nonetheless, I was never starved for a grampy affection. It simply presented itself in Mingish ways. I was fortunate enough to grow up very close to both of my grandparents, and as a young kid, spent a lot of time in the studio hanging out with his assistants during lunch or drawing on their drafting tables, which I only know about now because there's some pretty cute photo evidence. I grew up so close to the work Grandpa was doing at the end of his career that I always took it for granted. He was just Grandpa, smiling, friendly, somewhat distant, working, and strong. But as I said, I never hungered for more attention or affection. He gave me plenty of warm, loving hugs, but mostly we grew close just by being near each other so often. I felt his love simply in his comfort with just having me around, in the 60-second phone chats or our little traditions. Anytime we would go out to dinner, for example, I would always, or as often as I could, be the one to help him out of his jacket and into his chair. He always wore the same one, a dark navy blue suit jacket with round gold buttons, sometimes a Kleenex stuffed in the pocket. I would lift it off his shoulders and place it on the back of his chair and scooch him forward to the table. After dinner, I'd help him put his arms back through his jacket, one sleeve at a time, rerouting his hands when they get stuck. A small thing, but for me, it was an act of deep care, and I think for him, it was a small act of trust. And certainly for a man who rarely displayed or invited physical affection, this was a special thing. There were many moments when he was simply Gramps. He was Gramps sitting at the breakfast table eating half a grapefruit with sugar, or whistling along to his Walkman without realizing while Grandma and I tried to read Harry Potter. And he was especially Gramps one summer in high school after I'd come back from some music festival. Out to dinner, I helped him out of his blue jacket, and he turned around exclaiming, "Wow, who is this tall girl?" with his oh-so-charming smile. He was even Gramps walking me through the Rose Garden at the White House before receiving the National Medal of the Arts, where, by the way, Laura Bush totally copied my skirt suit. Okay. He was still Gramps during summer trips to the Kennedy Center or at the yearly Clambakes, and he was Gramps in his studio, late at night as I fell asleep in the living room, listening to records and poring for hours over the liner notes, faintly humming to himself. But there came other moments when Gramps was clearly someone else. The realization of my grandfather being Ming wasn't at the Kennedy Center or at the White House. It came in 10th grade when Mom, Dad, and I went to see his production of Kovanchina at the Met. If you don't know it, his production opens with the Kremlin, just the top of the Kremlin, and it ends with this amazing funeral pyre that burns. But at the top of one of the middle acts, the curtain comes up to reveal the Red Room, a cavernous, expansive palace set covered in this rich velvet red hue. The house erupted into applause, and everyone was on their feet. I looked around confused because there was no one on stage yet. But slowly realizing, I looked back at the stage. They were giving a standing ovation to the set, to an artist who wasn't even in the house at the time. I didn't know a set could elicit that reaction no matter how magnificent. That's when I began to understand in earnest what my grandfather did. Even 2 years after his passing, it's difficult to parse out what it means to have a grandfather like Ming Cho Lee. When someone is as impactful as he was, there can be no question that relationships of those closest to him become complex, fraught. And this was never lost on me. And at the same time, I was his granddaughter, for whom he had immense love, who he let in by just being around. I saw him at the end of his working life, and through a period of reward and adoration for the work he had done, I watched him struggle to figure out who he was once his work was finished, an exploration I don't think he completed to anyone's satisfaction. I saw him in all his awkwardness as he navigated what it is to be a grandfather. And I think because he was my grandfather, I got to have him just a little more settled, a little softer, and a little warmer than perhaps he was with others. As Grandpa's health declined, it became harder to remember all those little moments and the person he'd been. I became consumed with this final journey I saw him on. It was heavy and it was hard, not only for him, but for my grandmother, my parents, my uncles, aunt, and cousins. The morning after his death, I woke up early at Grandma's apartment and went for a walk around the reservoir in Central Park. And all of a sudden, as I walked, I could remember. I could remember those nights in their apartment after a long day of Chinese checkers with Grandma, tucked in for the night in the living room. I could see him framed by the studio doors, sitting at his drafting table into the dead of night, Gramps, by the light of his desk lamp, listening to his records, the liner notes in one hand, the other gently conducting in the air. This is how I like to remember him best. A grandpa who allowed me to be around and to observe him without pretense. He was never anyone other than Ming. But he allowed me to be there and to see him and to be close to him. And no matter how short the phone call, he always made sure to add, "I love you," before handing me off to Grandma. So for my final "I love you" to him, I would like to sing a piece I performed at his 80th birthday party. Some of you were there. Music is something that he and I were able to share much more as I got older. His real belief in me as a performer is something that I carry with me every day and will cherish forever. So in honor of all the things that Grandpa was, this is Something Wonderful from The King and I. This is a man who thinks with his heart. His heart is not always wise. This is a man who stumbles and falls, but this is a man who tries. This is a man you'll forgive and forgive and help and protect as long as you live. He will not always say what you would have him say, but now and then he'll say something wonderful. The thoughtless things he'll do will hurt and worry you. Then all at once he'll do something wonderful. He has 1,000 dreams that won't come true. You know that he believes in them, and that's enough for you. You'll always go along, defend him when he's wrong, and tell him when he's strong. He is wonderful. He'll always need your love, and so he'll get your love. A man who needs your love can be wonderful.
does that all contribute to society? What is the role of these people like yourself and the students? What is their role in society?
Well, I would say this. See if I can say it. I think if this instant gratification, if this society that is completely about money and marketplace, everything is based on marketplace value, and I think in a way, a good part of the society in China, especially in Shanghai, has gotten to that. Well, I am not sure how the arts can actually survive in it. Very scary. And I'm sometimes wondering whether democracy, this very imperfect, enlightened, even though sometimes it's filled with hypocrisy, but nevertheless enlightened system of governance, system of living with each other that is based on this imperfect document called Constitution, U.S. Constitution. I don't know whether it will survive. And we don't need an enemy to destroy us. We will destroy it ourselves. And it's happening.
How does art fit into
And I would say the art will just become the shallowest kind of entertainment, time killer. And for me, I'm not saying art should be so serious that it is boring. I hate that. It should be entertaining. But there are entertainment and entertainment. I call entertainment when I am moved, when I'm crying and I can't get out of the theater, when I'm laughing on the floor and the absurdity of life, of the situation, inform me how life can be so absurd. Or to see Romeo and Juliet and realizing that what a wondrous thing when you experience love at first sight. And that kind of thing, in some way, is entertaining and impactful. And for me, the reason I call it the most humane of arts is because it is about storytelling. And by telling the story, it is about us, how we relate to the society, how society relate to us, how society affect us, how we affect the social movement, and how we deal with all the major issues that affect us, and how do we put it into some form that actually allows us to examine it and be impacted by it, and just allow us to feel more expansively, more deeply, and to be able to think in a bigger way. And that is all part of arts. And for me, what is great art is to open doors and make you more sensitive, rather than having spectacles, having noise, having lights that go like this, and you're submerged by all those effects, and you come out and say, okay, I'm exhausted. Did not feel one stupid thing. You probably didn't hear anything. I would go to a restaurant now. It is so noisy, and everyone at the bar talking all at once. That's not a conversation. But they had good time. And they probably went home and have no idea what had happened for the whole evening. Now, if that go on further and further, then I think the Constitution and the arts is an endangered species. And what does one do to keep it from being truly endangered? Well, in a small way, I keep teaching and I'm not giving up. And for years, I did not give up on voting. I have become a total Democrat. I don't even want to think independence anymore. I just want to make sure that this nightmare is not continuous. Someone at least, you know, if this spew out, I can't stop it, I'm at least stopping something here. And this is what we are doing to a point. And it is so hard, it is painful. And at Yale, I kept saying, if you're in the theater and you're about storytelling, and you are going to say, I'm too busy at Yale doing production, I'm not voting, I said, I'm personally going to blow Yale Drama School up.
Hi. I think most of you know me. I've been around long enough, I think. But I'm Richard. I'm Dad's oldest son. And on behalf of David and Eileen and Andrew, who are here, and Karen and Katie, who are here with us, and on behalf of Eamon and Chris, who couldn't come from the West Coast, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you for taking a few hours to revisit Dad with us. I left my notes backstage, so I'm going to have to do this. I don't quite know how. You'll have noticed that there are probably two themes to this afternoon. One is the idea of family and community. And let me just start there. You must continue to be Dad's family. He was never more alive, more fully engaged, more fully himself, more secure than when he was working with you, arguing with you, eating with you. And it was a gift from all of you to him. I don't know how to express it. He came to this country in 1949 with very little English and became a theater major, became a speech major. And he found a community in the theater department at Oxy, moved to New York with some friends, found a larger community in New York that became the people he ate lunch with every day and argued with at night and drank scotch with before you all went home. And this gave him centeredness and an identity and a role in the world. And that gift allowed him to do what he did. Whatever impact he has had on each of us individually, it is because communally you enabled him to do it. You know, I love Elizabeth Warren, and especially her tagline that it doesn't matter who you are or what you have done in this world, you did not do it alone. And nothing Dad did he do alone. Please remember Jerry Friedman and Tito Capobianco and Frank Corsaro and the picture of Carlisle Floyd and Norman Traegle and Theone Aldridge and Marty Aronstein, and I could go on and on and on. I'm choosing names from when I was 7 or 8, and they've stuck with me. Please hold tight to each other. Please do not let Emily Mann and Michael Kahn and John Casarda and Pat Woodbridge and Rhoda Levine and Jan Strasvogel and I don't know who else. Please forgive me for just picking names out of thin air. You are all Dad's family. You are all, as far as that goes, my family. And Mom's family, and we are all so grateful to still have you as our family. So now let me get to the second point, which is to speak to the family. It's kind of terrifying to look at that clip that we just played from 2008 and have the words resonate not just as clearly as ever, but even louder. It's terrifying to think that the struggle that Dad constantly engaged in, finding and pushing forward a role for the arts in society, for the artist in society, it's terrifying to think that that struggle is even harder now, even more fraught. But there are some things we can hold on to. We can hold on to constantly questioning, to constantly examining, to constantly honing in on the emotional response, the truth that we cannot let go of. We must continue to do that if we are to honor Dad. We must continue to do that lest all of our work be taken out to a dumpster in New Jersey and burned. So this is by way of honoring Dad as the number one son in the best way I can. Two things. David, can we bring the house lights up? We joked as Dad neared the end of his life that what he really wanted more than anything else was a standing ovation at a standing room only filled 3,000-seat Metropolitan Opera. He really wanted that. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's join me in giving Dad one last standing ovation. And finally, I think of this as my charge to the graduating class. I'm 63, so I can get away with that now. When Dad passed away 2 years ago, almost to the day, we were facing an election, and there was a meme that went around the internet because Ruth Bader Ginsburg had just passed away. And the meme read, "In lieu of flowers, go vote." Some of you have traveled from places where your votes will count a lot more than mine will in Park Slope. It doesn't matter. Please, for Dad, for us as a family and a community, go now and vote.